The Zoom screen had been open for 4 minutes when it happened. Courtroom 9 had been running its hybrid remote sessions for months by then, defendants calling in from living rooms, kitchens, parked cars, the occasional bathroom that everyone politely pretended not to notice. It had become, in its strange way, a window into the actual texture of people's lives, the real rooms they lived in, the real circumstances that surrounded them. Judge Frank Caprio had adapted to it with the same patient attentiveness he brought to everything, reading the faces on the screen the way he read the faces in the gallery, watching for the thing beneath the thing, the story behind the citation. He had learned to look past the pixelation and the bad lighting and the muted microphones to find the person inside the frame. And then the frame on screen 4 filled with a man named Joel Carver, 39, who did not realize his camera was on, and what Judge Caprio and every person in that courtroom watched in real time, on a shared screen projected against the wall, was Joel raising a small canister to his face and inhaling from it with the practiced, desperate efficiency of someone who has done this many, many times before. The courtroom went absolutely still, not the polite stillness of procedure, the deep, suctioned stillness of a room that has just witnessed something it did not expect and does not know how to categorize yet. The court reporter's hands were above her keys. The bailiff near the door stood up straighter. 3 people in the gallery exchanged a look that contained, without words, the complete sentence, "Did we all just see that?" If you are watching this and something in your chest has already shifted, not to judgment, but to something more complicated and more important than judgment, stay with me. Comment below with the word Joel, because what Judge Caprio does next is not what you expect, and it is the reason I keep coming back to this courtroom. Subscribe, because this is the story that will remind you what it looks like when authority chooses understanding over condemnation, and why that choice is sometimes the most powerful one a room can witness. Joel Carver had been summoned for a failure to appear on 2 prior traffic violations, both minor, both unresolved, both symptoms of a life that had been operating in survival mode for longer than the court record could document. He was thin in the way people are thin when eating is not the main priority. His apartment, visible in the background of his camera frame, held the specific sparse disorder of a space where the person living in it has not had the energy to address surfaces in some time. A jacket on the floor, stacked takeout containers on a counter, curtains that blocked all the natural light. He wore a gray hooded sweatshirt and had the sunken, over-alert eyes of someone whose nervous system had been chemically reorganized over a long period of time. When the canister moment happened, Joel did not immediately realize what had occurred. He lowered the canister, exhaled, looked at the camera, and found, on the projected wall screen visible to the entire courtroom, 60 people looking back at him. His expression moved through confusion, then recognition, then a cascading, visible horror that was the most honest thing in the room. Judge Caprio watched it happen. He watched all of it, the inhalation, the exhale, the realization, the horror. He watched it the way he watches everything, completely, without flinching, and without immediately deciding what it meant. He said calmly, "Mr. Carver, I need you to stay on the line. Do not disconnect." Joel's hand moved toward his keyboard. It stopped. "I saw what just happened," the judge said, and his voice carried no anger, no theater, no performance of moral authority. It carried something considerably more difficult to dismiss than any of those things. It carried honesty, delivered at close range, without a shield between it and its target. "I am not going to pretend I didn't, and I am not going to move past it as if it doesn't matter, because it matters." The room was so quiet, you could hear the fluorescent lights. That's when everything changed, not with a revelation pulled from a file, not with a document placed on the clerk's table, but with a question asked directly at a face on a screen, a question so simple and so serious that it reorganized the entire atmosphere of the room in a single sentence. "Mr. Carver, how long has this been going on?" Joel Carver looked at the camera. His mouth opened. He closed it. He looked away from the screen for a moment, to the left, to that specific direction people look when they are deciding whether to tell the truth about something they have been carrying alone, and then he looked back. And in a voice that was rough and stripped of everything except the exhaustion of a person who has been asked directly and cannot find the energy to construct a performance, he said, "A while, 2 words, 11 letters. A room full of strangers, in a courthouse in Providence, who had come that morning for traffic violations and minor citations and the ordinary business of a municipal court, heard those two words and understood them completely. The gallery did not react with noise, it reacted with the absence of noise, the particular silence of people who have just been reminded that every person in every case is also a person outside of it, carrying something the docket does not record and the citation does not address. Judge Caprio asked Joel about the traffic violations, briefly, procedurally, because they were real and they would need to be addressed. But he asked something else first, and it was the something else that mattered. Do you have anyone? Anyone who knows where you are, what's happening with you, who checks in? A longer pause. Then, not really. The judge wrote something. He wrote for longer than the question required. In the gallery, a man in the fourth row who had come to fight a parking ticket looked at his hands. A woman near the aisle thought about her brother. The court reporter was typing, but her face was doing something her typing could not capture. What followed was not a sentencing. It was not a reprimand. It was not the efficient processing of a case that had become inconvenient. It was something older and more essential. It was a judge who had seen, through a pixelated screen in a makeshift remote courtroom, a man at the bottom of something and had decided that the bottom was the most important place to be accurate. Judge Caprio ordered Joel Carver to appear in person. Not as a punitive measure, he said this explicitly, clearly, for the record. I'm asking you to come in because I want to see you. Because what I just witnessed concerns me as a human being, not just as a judge, and because there are resources I want to connect you with in person that I cannot hand you through a screen. He paused. I want you to come in, Mr. Carver. I am asking you. Can you do that? Another pause. The kind of pause that has weight. Yeah, Joel said. I can do that. He appeared 6 days later. He arrived on time, which the court officer would later mention was not a given and had clearly required effort. He wore clean clothes, not dressed up but clean, which under the circumstances represented something significant. He was thin and tired, and he sat at the defendant's table with the posture of a man who has decided to show up to something even though showing up is frightening and is trying to let the decision speak for the fear rather than the other way around. Judge Caprio addressed the traffic violations first, because they were real, because accountability is part of respect, and because pretending the violations did not exist would have been a form of condescension. The fines were reduced significantly in acknowledgement of Joel's financial circumstances, with a payment plan structured to be genuinely manageable rather than theoretically manageable. The failure to appear charge was addressed with honesty on Joel's part and proportionality on the court's. And then the judge leaned forward slightly and said, in the voice that the court reporter had learned over 11 years to transcribe very carefully because it tended to contain things that mattered. Mr. Carver, inhalant dependency is a medical condition. It is also one of the most dangerous and least discussed forms of addiction, and the people who struggle with it tend to do so alone because it carries a particular stigma that keeps them from asking for help. He looked at Joel directly. Not over his glasses, directly at the man. You did not ask for this. I don't know your history and I'm not going to pretend I do. But I know that what I saw on that screen was a person in real trouble. And I know that real trouble has no obligation to be convenient for a court calendar. Joel Carver was looking at the table. Then he looked up. I'm going to give you a referral today, the judge continued. A real one. To a program that deals specifically with inhalant dependency, run by people who understand it and have helped people through it. I cannot make you use it. I would not insult you by trying to. But I am going to hand it to you, and I am going to tell you, in front of every person in this room, that using it would not be weakness. It would be the bravest thing you could do. He paused one final time. And I think you have more bravery in you than you currently believe. The courtroom was silent. The good silence. The kind that is not empty. The clerk handed Joel Carver a printed referral card and a brochure. He held them in both hands. He did not fold them. He did not put them in his pocket immediately. He looked at them for a moment the way people look at things they are deciding whether to trust. He kept them. 3 months later, Joel Carver called the number on the referral card. He did it on a Tuesday evening, sitting on the floor of his apartment with the curtains open for the first time in what felt like a long time. The late light coming in gold and ordinary and indifferent in the way that light is when a person is ready to let it in. The intake coordinator who answered had heard everything before and had not been made tired by it. They scheduled an appointment for that Thursday. He went. He did not go because the court ordered him to. He went because a judge had seen him through a screen on a bad morning and had spoken to him like a person worth addressing, and because that, the simple radical act of being seen without being dismissed, had lodged somewhere in him and refused to leave. The traffic fines were paid in full by the following spring, in 4 installments, the last of which Joel dropped off at the courthouse in person, which he did not have to do but chose to do anyway, because he wanted the building to have a different ending than the one he had given it. If this story reached you somewhere real, if you thought of someone while you were reading it, someone in a gray sweatshirt in a dim apartment who just needs one person to ask the right question, leave a comment below with the word Joel and tell me what you think it means to see someone fully at the worst moment of their life. Share this with someone who is carrying something alone right now and might need to be reminded that asking for help is not the end of the story. It is sometimes the very first sentence of the real one. And subscribe, because this courtroom keeps teaching us the same thing in 100 different cases, that justice is not only about what people have done, it is about what they might still become.